How is AI helping archaeologists and historians to uncover the secrets of 2,000-year-old scrolls? If you don't know me, I'm Dr. Jess Venner. I'm an ancient historian and an archaeologist, and I'm on a personal mission to make history more relatable and ultimately more fun. This is my brand new YouTube channel, and you can find me over on TikTok and Instagram as well. But let's get into the scrolls. Not too long ago, the Vesuvius Challenge released a call for competitors in a worldwide competition. And the challenge was to find a way to make reading and transcribing the contents of over 600 ancient scrolls from Herculaneum a quicker and easier task. Seems fairly simple so far, but what if I told you that these scrolls were carbonised? Now, this happened during the eruption of Vesuvius in AD 79, and Herculaneum, which was much closer to the volcano than Pompeii, was hit with much harder and higher heat pyroclastic flows, and these are fast, hot flows of ash and air, and they can reach up to 400 degrees Celsius, or at least they did at this time. The oxygen limited environment and the conditions in which this happened in AD 79 caused the scrolls and other carbon heavy organic materials in Herculaneum to essentially turn into charcoal. And therein lies the clincher. Scientists have tried to unravel the scrolls, of course, but they just fell apart because they are like charcoal, and this meant that any information that they held was destroyed. But from what they have managed to open and save, they now know that they mostly contain Greek Epicurean texts, or in other words, philosophical texts linked to the school of the philosopher Epicurus. And this is where AI enters the chat. Scientists have been trying to use AI technology to virtually unwrap the scrolls that were carbonised. And it all started when a professor from the University of Kentucky imaged Herculaneum scrolls in a particle accelerator. And he used this to generate 3D CT scans at really high resolutions. And from the fragments of scrolls generated, they were able to see ink. Then another team began mapping the 3D structures of the scrolls, but they wanted other people to come forward with their ideas to accelerate the process. They didn't want to hoard this idea and for it to take a long time. And another contestant, Casey Handmer, stared at the CT scans for hours on end and was able to eventually make out what he came to call crackle patterns. Now, these are essentially ink marks on the pages of the unrolled scrolls. And Casey was the first person in 2,000 years to find ink and a letter inside an unopened scroll. It's just incredible. And this is where we meet Luke Farrishaw, who's a 21-year-old student. And he was listening to a podcast one day about the Vesuvius Challenge and decided to give it a go. So Luke began spending his evenings training a machine learning model to understand the crackle pattern. And with each new crackle found, the model improved, revealing more crackle in the scroll. So this was kind of a cycle of discovery and refinement. And he used subtle, small-scale differences in the surface texture to train his neural network and highlight the ink. And after finding a few dozen ink strokes and some complete letters, he labelled these and used them as training data. And then before long, the model was unveiling traces of crackle invisible to his own eye. Soon these traces began to form letters and hints of actual words. So then Luke made his submission to the first letters prize, which required contestants to find at least 10 letters in a 4 centimetre square area. And this was his submission. Now, upon receiving the entry, the team of papyrologists, scholars who specialise in working on papyrus, apparently audibly gasped. Upon the page that was captured by Luke and the machine learning model, they could immediately read the word porphyros, or purple. And while the letters were faint, the word was clear. So the image then went through technical review, and a newer version of the picture was sent to the panel of papyrologists again, and all of them, working independently of one another, unanimously annotated 13 letters. Now, what makes this very difficult task even harder is that the spaces weren't a thing in ancient texts. The spaces between words that we have today just weren't a thing. So half of the challenge is actually working out where one word ends and another begins, or what we would call word boundaries. After Luke's hard work, The challenge awarded him $40,000 for the first letters prize. At the same time, Yusuf Nader, who is an Egyptian biorobotics grad student in Berlin, was making similar discoveries using a different approach. Now, inspired by Casey and Luke's discoveries, he went through the open access winning entries of the ink detection prize, which are kept on a site called Kaggle, and he began improving on these with a previous approach by someone called Stephen Parsons that he'd developed. And this used detached fragments to identify ink. But he was spurred on by Luke's award, and before long, he was able to identify letter shapes in the same area that Luke had looked using his own method. And this led to him winning the second prize in the competition. And because of his own method corroborating what Luke's method had found, the papyrologists were able to agree more strongly about the letters that they'd both seen. And they even began speculating on possible words above this, one meaning potentially achieving and one potentially meaning similar. Now, if these words are what we think they are, this means that we are for the first time in 2,000 years reading a text that was previously unknown to modern generations. Either it was never transcribed, as other texts throughout the centuries have been, or its transcription didn't survive to the present day. And within the last few days, I'm filming this in May 2024, we've had another incredible update from the project. Now, more text has been deciphered, and this time it tells us where a very famous philosopher was buried after his death in 347 or 8 BC, Plato. It tells us he was buried in a garden near the Museion, a shrine he built for the Muses. Now, this location near the Museion would be very fitting because of the significance that he placed on music in his philosophies. And he actually thought that music positively influenced the soul. And even on his deathbed, even though he was delirious, was still able to tell a female musician off for getting the rhythm wrong in her music. Now, the Vesuvius Challenge is upping the stakes and has more awards on offer. So it's $10,000 to read 90% of the scrolls 1 to 4, $100,000 to reproduce the results of the 2023 prizes but at a faster pace, three $30,000 awards to find the first letters in scrolls 2 to 4, and finally lots of little prizes for different challenges. It's a wonderful start to the translations, and I'll be sure to update you on here and on my other social media as soon as there are any other updates. But in the meantime, make sure that you subscribe on here and go and check me out on TikTok and Instagram, and I'll see you for the next video.